Chapter 4. I took a deep breath and opened the bathroom door. My heart leaped into my throat. There he was, standing only a few steps away. His hands were clasped behind his back. "Thank you for the clothes." My breathing quickened and I bit my bottom lip.
"They look perfect on you."
His gaze locked with mine and a smile slowly curved his lips.
"I'd like to take them all off again, but Rose is waiting for us."
That's good, I thought. I wasn't ready for getting naked with him just yet. At least my brain wasn't. My body had other ideas. I rubbed my damp palms across my thighs and gulped. Heat burned my cheeks and I looked away. It didn't matter. He knew what he did to me. My heart raced and liquid pooled between my legs again. His extra senses would never miss either of those things.
"Shade, tell me you aren't interested and I won't pursue taking our relationship further."
A relationship? Did that mean I wasn't just a pretty meal in his eyes? Could I have a relationship, intimate or otherwise, with a vampire? Was it possible? And why did he want me? My survival instincts said he wasn't the only unattached male in the town who might choose to pursue me. Better him than someone worse, but that wasn't a reason to lead him on. He deserved better than to be used. He'd been a gentleman so far, and he was kind. Plus, telling him I wasn't interested in him sexually would be an outright lie. He'd awakened something that I thought had long ago been beaten out of me. Desire. I opened my mouth but choked on my words. Rubbing my sweaty palms on my pants again, I looked up into his perfectly blue eyes and relaxed. There were no cages in Erick's house. That I could see. No chains on the walls. He didn't even have bars over the windows. He wasn't Kevin. Even with all my doubts, something deep down said it was safe to say yes. I want to try. The words slipped from between my lips before I could second-guess myself. Trust has cost me a lot in the past, though. I'm afraid.
"I'm glad you're giving me a chance."
Erick stepped closer, each movement calculated and confident. He reached out and touched my cheek, then followed the line of my face down until he cut my chin. His fingertips brushed over my ears and slipped into the wet hair at the base of my neck. A shiver flitted across the surface of my skin, energy charged between his hand and my cheek. Even though my first instinct was to pull away, I somehow found the courage to look up and meet his gaze instead. He made me feel so safe, so protected, completely out of reach of the evils that had always seemed to keep me on the move.
"Bailey, I've never brought a human to Sanctuary before. I've never interfered on behalf of a human to save their life before. Darius and I have been at each other's throats for longer than I can remember. But there's something about you."
He rubbed my cheek with his thumb and I leaned into the caress. I craved the affection he offered. He wasn't a drunk customer feeling me up or catcalling to me from across the room. Erick said he meant me no harm. My ex had said the same thing. He said he would protect me from the monsters. He said he loved me. I'd been young and foolish, maybe in love. Looking back, it was hard to remember a time when Kevin was kind. After our first couple of weeks together, things changed radically. One day I woke up in our bed with cuffs on my wrists and ankles and a collar around my neck. From that point, he never showed me affection again. I was a prisoner, and I didn't see the outside of his apartment again until the day I managed to escape. I want this. The words surprised me, but they were the truth. I did want this. And I wanted him, completely and totally. I hated being afraid of life, of living with the need to peer over my shoulder every time I stepped outside. He pulled me close, tucking me against his chest and wrapping his other arm around my waist in an embrace. Firm, but gentle. He kissed the top of my head and then released me. I missed his touch already. No one had kissed me like that since my parents had died. Not one of my foster parents had ever hugged me, and my high school boyfriends had only wanted to get in my pants. I was a cast-off, like so many others in the masses of labor-class citizens.
You have my protection, Bailey. Beyond anything that may or may not happen between us, you are safe in this town. Sanctuary can be your home if you choose.
No pressure, no guilt. Just a haven from all the worries and the nightmares that plagued me. At least for a while, but nothing was forever. Eventually, I would have to leave Sanctuary, and Erick, too. Kevin always made sure of that. But for now, his promise allowed me to relax, just a little.
Calliope sent a few pairs of shoes and 2 bags.
He gestured toward the bed. A pair of white ballerina flats, black tennis shoes, and some brown cowboy boots sat on the floor in a neatly arranged row. On the black comforter of his bed lay a white crocheted hobo bag and a black leather crossbody purse. They were nicer than anything I'd ever owned. Honestly, they were nicer than what I'd ever seen in a store.
She said she had others to choose from if you don't like these.
Tears threatened to spill from my eyes. He was a perfect stranger and considered to be a dangerous other, and he'd been kinder to me than any human being I'd come in contact with since my parents died. "Why?" I choked out, wiping my cheeks. "I'm a nobody to you. Why are you helping me? I won't be a whore." My fear slipped out again in those words, and anxiety churned inside me like soda in a shaken bottle. Maybe this was all for show. Maybe he just planned to use me like every other man I'd met in the last 5 years. Maybe the peace and safety I felt was a farce.
"Bailey," he growled, "am I dressing you like a whore?"
"No, but nobody is this nice to someone without wanting something in return."
"You're right."
There it was. He did want something. I knew it was all too good to be true.
"I want a chance to win your affections. Everything else is just a gift. No strings. If you don't want to stay with me, I'll find you an apartment of your own. If you don't want to see me, I'll find someone else to show you around town."
Affections? Who said that? It sounded like something out of one of those old historical novels I'd found. But then, he could be very old. My mind ran through everything he'd just said. He sounded so sincere, and I desperately wanted to believe him. I knew in my heart he meant me no harm. I trusted him when he said he was interested in me, though after seeing me the way I'd been before I showered, it still baffled me. Maybe vampires didn't smell unless they wanted to. Stranger still, I wanted to be with him. I wanted to stay near him. I wouldn't feel safe alone in an apartment with both a djinn and Kevin hunting for me. I'm indebted to you already for helping me. Now the clothes and everything you've bought. I'll pay you back. It'll take me a little while, but I will." He smiled and rubbed his hands up and down my arms.
"You cannot repay gifts."
I took a step forward and leaned into his chest, needing to feel the strength he possessed, needing to feel secure with my choice. Relief filled me when he wrapped his arms around my back and squeezed. He tucked my head beneath his chin.
"Thank you for your trust, mine Chaste."
I didn't need to speak his native tongue to know he'd just called me his. Hope began to fill that empty place in my heart, and I prayed to whatever gods might be listening to let me remain in Sanctuary for a while. For once I felt like I might have found a home, somewhere worth fighting to stay. I hate to let go of you, but I'm starving, and you smell like freshly baked donuts. Did you bring some of those back with you too? A deep laugh shook his chest as he leaned down and gave me a firm but quick kiss on the lips.
"Calliope had a box of them in her store from Rose. She's quite the little sugar fiend."
He moved toward the bed and grabbed the white flats, then threw me a questioning glance over his shoulder. I nodded.
"I didn't bring you any, but you can have as many as you like when we get to the cafe."
He put the flats on the floor at my feet. I slid them on and then giggled as the shoes shrunk and conformed. I'd never had shoes that fit so well or were so comfortable. They were tiny little flat shoes with barely any sole, but they felt like I was walking on air.
Good?
He asked, grinning down at me. Will they go back if I take them off? He took my hand and led me out of the bedroom and down the stairs.
No, the clothing conforms to the first body it touches. The spell is a mixture of appeal and comfort. Everything you wear is personalized to you. But if your body changes, so will the clothes.
He walked out the front door and he paused to lock the deadbolt. So, for children, the clothes grow with them? I asked.
Yes, and they are self-cleaning. One of my favorite updates. She only added that bit of magic last year, he continued, leading me along the sidewalk back the way they'd come earlier, back to what was obviously the center of the town.
That's why your clothes don't smell from being next to my dirty ones.
Yes,
he answered. She could make a fortune. Why doesn't she sell them everywhere?
Think about it. Most people try clothing on before they buy it.
Oh, I see how that would be a problem.
Calliope does sell things to a long list of very wealthy clients who travel to Sanctuary just for her designs. Her business single-handedly funds about half of the town's expenses, so we are very protective of her trade secrets.
Town expenses? She doesn't own the shop?
She does, but all businesses in the town take only a small percentage for personal use. The majority of the profits go to the castle and toward updating town defenses.
Doesn't she resent having to give away so much of her money? He paused and turned to face me.
Most of the residents of this town were independently wealthy long before they got here. None of us needs money. Calliope is no different. She doesn't care about the money. She cares about Sanctuary. We all do.
Is this whole town a cult of some sort? Are you going to fatten me up on fresh donuts and then slaughter me on that altar-looking thing in the center of the town circle? I tried to sound nonchalant about it, but mistrust had an uncanny way of roaring to life like a hornet's nest at a moment's notice. A bellowing laugh rolled up from his chest and echoed across the nearly empty street. I noticed a couple of passers-by glance in our direction and then continue on without pause.
You are the toughest little human female I've ever met. Scared to your wits' end and just spewing honesty for honesty's sake. Rose will adore you.
I took a step back and tapped my foot on the pavement. His laughter gave me a little more confidence. You didn't answer my question. A wide grin split his face.
I apologize. No, we are not a cult. The town functions more like a family or army.
That must be why they had titles, like Protector and Sentinel. It was a hierarchy. They each had their role to play. Will I need to learn to fight? I wondered what or who they usually fought. If it was others like Darius, I wasn't going to be much help. Erick grabbed my hand again and pulled me along the sidewalk.
Absolutely not. You are a guest.
I dragged my feet and barely managed to pull him to a stop before we reached the cafe doors. Erick, if I stay here in this town, I don't want to be a guest. I want to have a purpose, too. Surely there's something I can do to contribute.
Shannan, you are worrying too much. Please let me get you some breakfast and introduce you to Rose. She can answer more of your questions.
A sigh slipped from between my lips. I really did need to eat. And I wanted to stay, be with Erick, and pretend Kevin and the djinn weren't hunting me down to kill me. Erick knew he'd convinced me. The corners of his mouth turned up into a pleasant smile. I mentally fortified myself and nodded. I could do this. They were his friends. Garrett hadn't turned out to be so bad, and neither had the witch who'd helped send Darius packing. The door swung open and a petite woman stepped in front of it. Her long black hair was streaked with bold shades of pink, blue, and white highlights. She had it fixed in a high ponytail on top of her head. "Are y'all coming in any time soon, or should we bring the poor girl's breakfast out to the sidewalk?"
"Maven, this is Bailey,"
Erick said, pushing me closer to the tiny woman. The woman held out her hand and I smiled down at her. She couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall, but her energy made her seem much taller. Something else was a little different, too. Her skin glistened in the sunlight, like she'd bathed in something metallic. I shook her hand and she grinned before yanking me inside. Erick slipped in after me. She dragged me behind her with surprising strength toward the front counter of the cafe. "Rose, Erick finally showed up with his fair maiden. He's completely smitten. I can see it in his eyes."
"Maven,"
he growled from behind us. But the little sprite of a woman didn't care at all. She pushed me onto an empty stool just as another woman came through the kitchen door. She had beautiful caramel skin and silky black hair. Her soft brown eyes were kind and fierce, and I instantly felt safe in her presence. "Hush, Viking. You know that growly stuff doesn't scare me," Maven answered, giggling. "Raven, come out here." I glanced back and saw him roll his eyes. For a few moments he was just a man being teased, irritated but entertained at the same time. He wasn't upset with her, more like annoyed the way you would be annoyed by a sibling or a friend.
"Maven, stop shouting, you're scaring her."
The other woman spoke calmly in an accent I didn't recognize. She made her way around the counter and embraced me.
"It is good to meet you, Bailey. We are fortunate that you met Erick when you did. Darius was an unforeseen complication. But where are my manners? I am Rose Gila. Welcome to Sanctuary."
Thank you." I took a step back and bumped into Erick's large chest. Relief flowed through my body at his touch. A high-pitched, energetic voice cut through the noise of the cafe.
"OMG, Maven, she's so pretty!"
I glanced over Rose's shoulder, shocked to see another tiny woman, identical to Maven in every way except her hair. Instead of white, pink, and blue streaks, she sported a black ponytail with shades of red, orange, and white. Her skin also glinted metallic in the light.
"I told you,"
Maven squealed.
"Girls, please go tend to the kitchen. Corinne is in there cooking for the entire cafe all by herself."
"Yes, ma'am." The small, sprightly women echoed together and darted away, disappearing around the counter and through the kitchen door, their streaked ponytails flowing behind them like living rainbows. Rose turned back to me, and I met her powerful gaze.
"Please forgive the pixies' lack of decorum. Even though they're about 200 years old, they still act like hormonal teenagers."
"It's fine, really," I answered, trying to wrap my brain around even more new information. So many different others lived here.
"Good."
She gestured to the empty bar stool on my right.
"Erick, why don't you have a seat? I'll be right back with some pastries and something to drink."
"Are the two small women twins?" I asked, turning toward him. He nodded.
"Twin sisters. They are a touch of crazy mixed with a little bit of everything else. But Rose is right. They mean well. They can't help themselves. Anything new or shiny gets them all worked up. And they are fabulous cooks, so I've been told." "He has eaten Corinne's donuts, though. No one is able to resist those, not even a vampire,"
Rose added, walking in from the kitchen with a tray. She placed a plate of several different donuts in front of me and Erick, a glass of orange juice, and one empty tumbler.
"When was the last time you fed, Erick?"
He shook his head.
"I'm fine, Rose."
She snorted.
"You don't look fine. You look hungry."
My heart skipped a beat. I picked up the juice and took a quick sip. Both of them stared at me as I swallowed. Erick finally broke the silence.
"Are you unwell, Charé?"
"I'm fine. She said you looked hungry. How can she tell?" I studied his face, but couldn't discern any noticeable change in appearance. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a frown tug at Rose's lips.
"You've already tasted her blood, haven't you?"
Her pitch rose.
"What were you thinking?"
She laid a knife on the counter and heaved a sigh.
"I can feed him, but he'd rather have yours now."
"Mine? Feed him? What? So he did want to make a meal of me after all."
"Rose,"
he growled under his breath.
"You drank from her. You started it, not me. When were you planning on telling her you're psychologically bonding to her as we speak?" "It happened so quickly. I was distracted and I didn't think," he snarled.
You're over 1,000 years old, Thorson. You knew exactly what you were doing.
Hey guys, I'm sitting right here. It was a tiny cut. More of a lick, really. Neither acknowledged me, and their argument got nastier by the second, making me more and more uncomfortable. I took another gulp of my orange juice and then snatched a donut from the plate. If they weren't going to talk to me, I could at least eat. After one bite, I had to hold back a moan of pleasure. The sweet, buttery bread melted in my mouth, revealing just a hint of cinnamon and vanilla. The frosting tasted a little like a mix between maple syrup and honey. Simply divine. I shoved the rest of it into my mouth, continuing to ignore their quarrel. Food was now my only concern. I was starving. The last thing I'd eaten was that tiny pack of animal crackers at the bus station. I grabbed another donut and bit into the sticky sweet bliss. A few moments later, I'd polished off all 4 and had gulped down the rest of the orange juice. Honestly, I was still hungry. The alluring smell of bacon and eggs wafted from the kitchen. At home, my breakfast usually consisted of a piece of toast. An actual breakfast was a luxury I rarely afforded. Peanut butter and day-old bread made up 80% of my diet. The restaurant leftovers usually accounted for the other 20.
Let me get you a plate, Bailey. I'll be right back.
I glanced up from the countertop, surprised that Rose was talking to me. Her voice was calm and friendly, unlike the cold, biting tone she'd been using with Erick. I twisted in my seat and met his gaze. "Why is she upset with you? You didn't hurt me," I asked once she'd disappeared through the door to the kitchen.
"She's right. I took without asking."
"I'm fine, really."
"You are right now," he sighed, resting his elbows on the counter. "I'm the one who is feeling the bond already. I will always desire your blood now."
"Why?"
"If we heal those we drink from, our blood links us together. Some vampires choose to feed only from other supernatural beings. Their blood is different and doesn't create a connection. Not only did I taste your blood, but I used the smallest amount of mine to heal your cut."
"Meaning?"
"Meaning, my blood is inside you now. I am linked to you."
"What does that do to me?"
"I can sense where you are. If you are in pain or need help, I will know. I will protect you with my life, Share. You are part of me."
I looked down at the counter, taking a moment to absorb. He'd bonded to me? The door from the kitchen swung open, distracting me, and Rose returned, setting a plate full of scrambled eggs, bacon, and buttered toast down in front of me. I considered how easily I could scarf down the entire plate. I knew I shouldn't, but over the years I'd taught myself to eat when I could. Survival was everything. "Thank you for the food." I glanced up and met Rose's inquisitive gaze.
"When was the last time you had a full meal, dear?" she asked.
I stopped, the fork midway to my mouth. "A couple of days."
Rose nodded. "We have plenty, and you are welcome to come back for more any time of the day. One of us is always up cooking."
I thanked her again before I continued eating.
"Erick, we'll talk more later. Do you want a drink or—"
Rose's voice trailed off as her weighted gaze fell back on me once again. She seemed really concerned about the fact that he hadn't fed in a while. It started to bother me, too. "What happens if he doesn't eat?" I asked, putting down my fork.
"He gets cranky,"
Rose answered, a hint of a smile returning to her face.
"Staying sated gives a vampire good control. If they are hungry, they turn into a one-track record, only able to think about the thing they need."
I glanced at the blade she'd laid on the countertop. "How does he normally eat?"
"I usually drink Rose's blood or blood from one of the pixies. They cut their hand and fill a glass."
His voice was clipped and sharp, like he was disgusted at the very thought. How could one drop of my blood throw him off his norm?
"Because it was a really good drop,"
a familiar male voice called out. "Garrett." The bell on the door rang as it closed behind the lichen. He walked in with a swagger that announced he was quite pleased with himself. "Stop reading my mind," I thought as loudly as possible.
You were the one asking the question, Garrett said, chuckling. He and Erick exchanged a look I couldn't decipher, but it didn't enhance Erick's mood at all. In fact, it made him even more agitated. So much so I thought he would get up and leave the cafe without me. I placed a hand on his thigh. He instantly turned his gaze on me, and it softened. The sweet, sexy man who'd taken care of me in his bathroom this morning returned, and some of the tension in his shoulders melted away. The thought of cutting myself really makes me ill, but maybe, if it doesn't hurt too much, you could just bite me and drink from my arm or something. His eyes widened at the suggestion, and the entire cafe silenced. Even Rose stopped walking across the dining room with a tray full of food.
Bailey, I can't. Drinking from your vein is not something to take lightly. You can't come back from it. Your people would label you a blood whore if I left the marks. If I heal the marks, that means you continue to be exposed to my blood, which will only strengthen the bond between us.
The words stung. I'd always sworn I'd never let a vampire drink me for money. Erick had saved my life several times. It only seemed fair that I repay his kindness in the only way I could, with blood. But now they were reacting to my words like the very act was something much more than just me providing a man with a meal. Why would being exposed to more of his blood be a bad thing? Bond or no bond, it was still just food to him. Plus, the idea of being bonded to a man, to a creature like Erick, might keep me safe from Kevin, from the djinn, from anything that wanted to hurt me. Garrett rose from his table and crossed the room. Erick's leg twitched beneath my palm, but he didn't speak. Garrett leaned against the counter to my left.
It is more. By agreeing to do this, you agree to be his. The more of his blood in your veins, the stronger his claim to you in our world. You shouldn't make a decision like this without knowing the facts. No one will think less of you if you turn him down and consider other options.
A low growl rumbled in Erick's throat, and his muscles tensed beneath my hand. I knew what Erick held back. Garrett did too. The Lycan took a step back, but didn't leave. He was interested in me. I could see the heat in his eyes. Garrett's nostrils flared, and he stared back with an intensity I couldn't match. Dropping my gaze to the floor, I shook my head. I wasn't interested in him that way. No argument, he was more than handsome, but his touch and gaze didn't light my body on fire the way Erick's did. I've made my choice, Garrett. Looking back up, he held my gaze for a moment before muttering something unintelligible beneath his breath. Apparently, it hadn't been difficult for Erick to understand. He leaped from his seat with a terrifying snarl and his fangs bared. My heart stopped in my chest, and I held my breath. No, no, no! The word echoed in my mind over and over. Stop! Rose's voice cut through the noise like a cannon shot. I tried to turn to look at her, but found I couldn't move. What the hell? I was frozen as if someone had paralyzed every muscle in my body. Erick and Garrett were the same, stuck in midair, just about to try and choke the life out of each other. What had happened? What could wield such power over everyone? My question was answered when Rose walked up to the three of us and lowered the tray to her waist. If she was the only one moving, she was the one doing the holding. You will leave her alone, Garrett. Bailey belongs to Erick until she states otherwise. Blood bond or no. Belongs? Hell, I was no man's property. I tried to speak, but whatever was holding us prevented that as well. Garrett turned his gaze to mine. I noticed the movement out of the corner of my eye. He'd heard my thought. Damn mind reader. The amusement in his eyes infuriated me more. Who the hell was Garrett to think he could lay any claim on me? I hadn't belonged to a man since my ex, who derived pleasure from beating the shit out of me. I might stay with Erick and grow closer to him through this bond, but I wasn't his. I turned my gaze toward Garrett, as far as my paralyzed head would allow. And I'm sure as hell not yours to worry about. He looked away. The amusement was gone from his sparkling eyes. He'd gotten the message. Stay out of my fucking head, too. As quickly as it had washed over the cafe, the energy that locked us into place faded away. Garrett stomped out, slamming the door behind him. Erick stood and glared at Rose.
I wouldn't have hurt him, he muttered. Not much, anyway.
Not in my cafe, she quipped back. If you want to act like a barbarian from the 10th century, do it outside, away from the buildings. 10th century? I'd heard Rose call him a Viking, whatever that was. How old were the rest of the people around here? Please don't, I faltered. I'll leave if it's going to cause problems. I've been running for years. I'm used to being alone. You're not leaving. Travis and his brother Garrett are rough around the edges, but it was just his way of making sure you really wanted to be with Erick. Lycans are like that. They develop attachments quickly and are very protective. When he realized you would be staying in town, you became part of the pack, so to speak.
He's new to the town and already feels ownership.
Erick growled again and rolled his neck, narrowing his gaze at Rose.
You should have warned me he was coming. I didn't even know Travis had a brother. Is he staying in Sanctuary or just passing through?
I wasn't sure when he would arrive, so there was nothing to tell. He's joining his brother at the tattoo shop. Travis lost touch with Garrett until just recently. They both thought the other had died in a fighter fight after the riots.
Army, like Travis, huh?
Special forces, she answered and nodded. He slipped an arm around my waist and pulled me close to his chest.
Sorry.
But everything is okay? You aren't going to fight? I can't stay if I'm going to cause problems.
There will be no more problems with Garrett, I promise. I do need to introduce you to the Blackmore brothers, but we can tackle that later.
More brothers? What are they, cats? Erick snorted.
There might be more problems if they ever hear you call them that.
What did Rose do? I asked after she disappeared into the back of the restaurant. What kind of other can paralyze people? Erick sighed and leaned his elbows on the cafe countertop.
She is something very ancient and very powerful. If and when she wishes to share, she will. Just know you are safe here, Bailey. She promised to protect you like one of her own.
I nodded. Their desire for secrecy was understandable. I could only imagine what might happen if people found out about her, about this town.
Maven, would you bring me a box of the donuts to go?
He called at the back wall. The little pixie came scampering out a few moments later and slid a box down the counter. He caught it and tipped his head in her direction. "Corinne says to enjoy," Maven said, a bright smile lighting her face. "Tell her thank you." "Will do." Maven's smile widened, and I couldn't help but smile back. They all seemed fine. No one was still nervous about what had just gone down. The other people eating in the dining room were laughing and carrying on as if nothing had happened at all. Erick scooped up the box in one hand and looped his other through my right arm.
We have a few things to talk about. Would you please walk with me?